Wes du har min freon and welcome to yet another video. As September 2022 is approaching with the speed of light, there have been people that are turning suddenly and are being fooled by Morgoth Bauglir, Amazon itself, and their latest teaser trailer that was released. They call it the full-length trailer or the main teaser, and a lot of people have admitted that visually it looks pretty, and I also do admit that thanks to the CGI effects and editing, the trailer looks pretty. But this is even worse than if the trailer looked bad, because this will fool many people in the world to suddenly start turning and changing 180 degrees and giving Amazon an inch. And other people will be like sheep, because let us admit, people are sheep, dumb and stupid plebs who are just following the crowd. And they will not want to stick out. And suddenly, we will find ourselves in the midst of people who like the Rings of Power just because it is expected from them. And that is the greatest danger that there is. And I always say, your dear old European law, that I will always fight for Professor Tolkien. I will always respect the law. Now, there has been some development in my view of Amazon's The Rings of Power from me perceiving it as an intrusion and corruption of Tolkien's world, because I said that it was just adapting the Lord of the Rings in the appendices to the Lord of the Rings, the appendices, and that they were breaking the law, desecrating it here and there, taking just a couple of bits and pieces and factoids and characters, and then filling the gaps with their own original Amazon's creations, like the characters of Rondir, Halbrand, who supposedly should be Sauron, apparently, and then the half-foot hobbits like Sir Larry Henry's character. But I've realized that, well, they can't break the law if there is no law in the Rings of Power to be broken in the first place. See, this has absolutely nothing to do with Tolkien. There is no trace of the Professor in the upcoming atrocity by Amazon other than the names. Because even those characters that Amazon took from the appendices to The Lord of the Rings, written by Professor Tolkien himself, even those characters are unrecognizable from all that we have heard and read and all that we know as of now. The descriptions of the characters absolutely do not fit the characterizations of the people, and elves, and men, and dwarves in the book. So the only thing that the Rings of Power share with Tolkien's text is some of the names, and only some of them. And now, of course, those sheep have been enjoying, once again, sharing bits and pieces of lines and sentences and phrases taking from Tolkien's texts and from his letters, taking absolutely out of context. Well, I would like to point to one particular letter, and that is the letter 210, from a letter to Forrest J. Ackerman, not dated June 1958, and it is a Tolkien's comments on the film treatment of The Lord of the Rings. Now, the beginning of the letter is the most important here, because the rest of the letter then deals with his particular gripes and problems and criticisms of the treatment itself. And I encourage you, my dear friends, read the rest of the letter. I will read that part which is relevant here, because it is always important to share, to quote all the relevant parts of that particular sentence and or letter, paragraph, text, whatever Tolkien wrote. Not just a sentence or two, and then say, oh, see, Tolkien meant this by that. No, but it is taken out of context. So I will read you. Please look at the screen so you can see it for yourselves. I took a picture from my copy of letters of J.R.R. Tolkien. I will read out the beginning of the letter 210 from a letter to Forrest J. Ackerman. And it deals with Tolkien's overall stance on adaptations. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, I might have admitted that Peter Jackson's trilogy is a worthy adaptation, and indeed one of the best adaptations of a novel ever made in the history of movie making. But you might also remember that I have always, since I started making videos to this channel, I've been encouraging people to go back and read the books, read the original material. If given the choice, go for the book, go for the source material. Myself, I don't watch adaptations anymore. I find no pleasure in them. As a matter of fact, they are a nuisance to me. Because I always see only the negatives and the changes there. Which of course is not that bad. If you read Tolkien's letter, you will see that his stance, his opinion, his view on the matter is exactly the same. So let us move on and let us read out the beginning of the letter. I have at last finished my commentary on the storyline. Its length and detail will, I hope, give evidence of my interest in the matter. Some, at least, of the things that I have said or suggested may be acceptable, even useful, or at least interesting. The commentary goes along page by page, according to the copy of Mr. Zimmerman's work, which was left with me, and which I now return. I earnestly hope that someone will take the trouble to read it. If Z and or others do so, they may be irritated or aggrieved by the tone of many of my criticisms. If so, I am sorry, though not surprised. But I would ask them to make an effort of imagination sufficient to understand the irritation and on occasion the resentment of an author who finds increasingly as he proceeds his work treated as it would seem carelessly in general, in places recklessly, and with no evident signs of any appreciation of what it is all about. The canons of narrative art in any medium cannot be wholly different, and the failure of poor films is often precisely in exaggeration and in the intrusion of unwarranted matter owing to not perceiving where the core of the original lies. Z has intruded a fairy castle and a great many eagles, not to mention incantations, blue lights, and some irrelevant magic such as the floating body of Faramir. He has cut the parts of the story upon which its characteristics and peculiar tone principally depends, showing a preference for fights, and he has made no serious attempt to represent the heart of the tale adequately, the journey of the ring-bearers. The last and most important part of this has, and it is not too strong a word, simply been murdered. Well, my dear friends, as you can clearly see and hear, Professor Tolkien was not very fond of anybody messing with his texts. Now, that particular other line that many people are talking about, this, I will leave place for other minds and hands to, somehow expand upon his world. He was not referring to either adaptations or making a film and completely changing what he wrote. You can see this in the works of John Howe, of Alan Lee, of Ted Naismith and other painters. You can see that in the works of the Blind Guardian band and many other heavy metal bands that have appeared in the history and have been influenced and inspired by Tolkien's texts. This particular inspiration we are talking about, absolutely not what Amazon is doing. But as I said, this letter deals with adaptations. And what Amazon is doing is much worse. They are burglars. They are thieves. They stole names. They might have bought them, but it's really a theft and desecration. And believe me, the sheep will follow. But those of you who possess brain, those of you who are able to, as Tolkien himself wrote it, who are able to make an effort of imagination sufficient to understand the irritation and on occasion the resentment of an author who finds increasingly as he proceeds his work treated as it would seem carelessly in general, in places recklessly, and with no evident signs of any appreciation of what it is all about. So please, those of you who have brains and who are able to do this, don't let Morgoth fool you. And that will be all. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you think, and Marie.